Hi and welcome back to Garden Ninja. Now today's video is going to be explaining the 5 main types of plants that you can use in your garden to create amazing displays. Now it's a little bit chilly because it's autumn here in the UK, so let's go inside to my design board and I'm going to explain exactly how by knowing these 5 groups you can create amazing garden spaces. Come on, let's get cracking. If you've not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, hit the red button to subscribe today. Also click the bell for notifications. We'll have access to hundreds of garden design hints, tips and hacks from me, the Garden Ninja. And best of all, it's free. Now, understanding the different types of plants is really important when it comes to gardening, because if you don't understand the types of plants, you're just going to be guessing, and guesswork usually leads to really patchy results. Now, I tend to group plants into 5 key areas. I'm going to talk you through those today and how each different type differs from the other one, and how you actually need a mix of all 5 different types of plants. So the first type of plants is annuals, the second is biennials, the third is perennials, the fourth are shrubs, and the fifth, last but not least, are trees. So let's start with annuals. So annual plants are probably the most common because you see them all the time in garden centres. Now, annual plants will germinate from seed, they then put on growth, flower, sometimes set seed and then die all in 1 year. So the key is the term annual. They only live for 1 year. And usually you'll recognise these because they are things like bedding plants, violas, some begonias and pelargoniums in the UK, which are treated as annual bedding plants. Now, annuals give you usually a riot of colour because they're super fast growing. But the problem with a lot of annuals is A, they only live for 1 year, and B, a number of them are actually bred to be sterile, which means that although they look really floriferous, covered in flowers and pollen, actually a lot of them can't set seed. So those poor insects and bees that fly down to these beautiful flowers are often met with no pollen, which is pretty much useless for wildlife. I tend not to use too many annuals in my garden because of the carbon footprint. Because they're bred rapidly for one season of interest and then usually composted, that doesn't sit well with me. I prefer things that produce pollen. But if you're going to use annuals yourself, you would use them in things like containers, pots, balcony gardens to add a pop of colour to your garden. But try and bear in mind that there may be better alternatives in some of the other plant types. Now the next group are the biennials. These are plants that put on their growth in year 1, flower in year 2, and then usually die off at the end of year 2. So they're kind of a step ahead of an annual, but you have to wait a year for the flower. Now some good examples of biennials are things like foxgloves, where you'll see that beautiful foliage that grows in year 1 with those slightly hairy leaves. And then in the second year, the main stem will come up and it will flower. It then sets seed, scatters the seed everywhere, and then dies back. So each year you're getting foliage, followed by the flower. And biennials are really interesting because they tend to be prolific self-seeders. So if you've got an awkward patch of your garden and you introduce, for example, some foxgloves, what you'll notice is they kind of keep themselves going with very little intervention from you. Now the next plant type is where things get really interesting, and they're my favourites, the herbaceous perennials. So perennials come back year after year and can live from anything from a couple of years all the way through to 25 or 30 years. So they're great value for money and they help keep interest in the garden. Now a herbaceous perennial will grow each year and it will usually form some type of clump or mass and a big root ball that sits under the ground. Each year it sends up its foliage, followed by its flowers. And the beauty of herbaceous perennials is, more often than not, they have loads of pollen and will be able to set seed. And this is really important for wildlife because all of that pollen can be used as a food source for bees and insects. And because the bees and insects are drawn to them, they will cross-pollinate each flower, meaning that the clump will get bigger, they may set seed, you'll get more plants for free. So it's a great way to ethically garden. Now, herbaceous perennials are huge. There are literally hundreds of thousands of different types of herbaceous perennials that you have to choose from. So the sky really is the limit. The other beauty about herbaceous perennial is once you've got it in the ground and it's happy, you can just leave it there. You only have to cut it back at the end of winter, and if it gets too big, you can lift them and divide them and propagate even more plants for free. And why not share them with your neighbours? So they're an absolute fantastic way to bulk up your gardens. And for new gardeners, just being aware that herbaceous perennials exist and will come back year after year can help you save time and money in the garden. So they're a fantastic plant group, and I urge you to check out all my other videos all about herbaceous perennials. Now, the next group of plants is often the most overlooked, but they're really important in the garden, and these are shrubs. Now, shrubs tend to differ from trees because trees usually only have one main stem, whereas a shrub will have multi-stems, and they're a lot smaller than trees for the most part. Now, shrubs are really important in the garden because they add what we designers call punctuation. So you can use a shrub to kind of break up a border and add a really solid full stop or even a comma to different parts of the garden to help guide your journey. Shrubs are also really important because they're a great habitat and haven for wildlife. If you just had a garden bed full of annuals, biennials and herbaceous perennials, by the time you get to the winter, there's not going to be much left because they all either die off or die back to the ground. So shrubs allow you to incorporate these evergreen and deciduous structures throughout the garden that will keep interest throughout the winter months. As I've mentioned, you usually have evergreen and deciduous. Evergreen keep the leaves and are green all year round, versus deciduous that lose the leaves and grow them back each year. And last but not least, we have the fifth group, which are trees. Now, trees are also known as the lungs of the earth because they absorb loads of carbon dioxide and then pump out precious oxygen that we humans and animals need to exist. Now, a lot of people worry about trees, thinking they're going to take over their gardens or uproot their houses, but that's not always the case. And there are plenty of fantastic trees for small gardens, but it's all about doing your research. Now, as I said before, trees usually have one main stem and then some form of canopy on the top. And did you know that you can pick different species of tree that have slightly different canopy shapes, whether they're round, fastigiate, whether they're more of a free-form shape or a tiered structure. So if you're really clever with your choices, you can add all sorts of different shapes and interests to the garden. Now, trees are fantastic because they offer a habitat for things like squirrels, moths, birds and all sorts of insects. But the important part with trees is that they soak up loads of carbon when they're growing. So if you buy young trees and watch them grow up, all that woody material is effectively storing carbon out of the atmosphere and locking it away, which is great for our climate emergency. The second interesting fact with trees is that they add height to the garden, which is much needed and often overlooked. If you've got a small garden or you live in an urban area, you may find that there's windows and viewpoints and people may be peering in at different times in the day. And the beauty with adding trees is that you can use a couple of well-spaced trees to help provide privacy, add a bit of dappled shade in those warmer summer months, but also increase the interest because your eye isn't just looking down at the ground, it's being taken up, hopefully through that shrub layer, into the trees, back down to herbaceous perennials, biennials, and the odd annual in a pot. So by using those 5 different types of plants, you can make your gardens much more immersive, you can make them far more wildlife friendly, and just make gardening easier by having a really rich environment for all these weird and wonderful creatures that makes you feel at home and quite private in your garden. Have you got gardening questions that you need answers for? Well, why not head over to the Garden Ninja forum on my blog, where you can ask me anything about gardens, plants and garden design. There's a whole army of other garden ninjas there that can help provide answers to your questions. It's a really great way to meet the other ninjas, so head over there now. So there we have my simple guide to the 5 different types of plant. And if you want to know how to arrange these different types in the garden, make sure you check out my How to Plant a Flower Bed guide on YouTube, where I show you the biggest secret that us designers have, which is plant layering. If you've liked this video, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, where there are plenty more garden design hints, tips and hacks to help you make your garden awesome. If you've got gardening questions, why not visit my blog, gardenninja.co.uk, where you can ask a question on the forum. And if you like what I'm doing, why not visit my shop, where you can pick up some handy merchandise to help give you support to the Garden Ninja community. I've been Garden Ninja, happy gardening.